All right, diving in today, folks, and we are going deep. We're talking about the Battle of White Plains.
October 28th, 1776, to be precise.
Yeah, 1776, a big year. It's a battle, that sometimes slips through the cracks a bit, when we talk about the
Right,
Revolution.
doesn't always get the same attention as some of the other big battles, but
Right.
it's really crucial to understand this period of the war,
Yeah, it's there in White Plains, New York. We got some great sources to dig into.
We do. We have some firsthand accounts, really detailed reports from the people who were there, who saw it happen.
So the mission today, right, to really get into not just what happened, but like the impact.
Exactly. We need to understand the context, the strategies, why this battle, why it matters in the grand scheme of the revolution.
Okay, so big picture first. It's October 1776. The revolution's in full swing. But what's the situation? How did these two armies end up in White Plains ready to throw down?
Well, you really have to go back to the British campaign to take control of New York City.
Right, New York, a huge strategic target.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
After their victory on Long Island, General Howe, he's leading the British forces.
Right.
He wants to crush the Continental Army.
No messing around.
No mess around.
Oh.
And that meant, like, cutting off Washington's escape,
Right.
forcing him into a fight they couldn't win.
So Washington, always a step ahead, right, had to be thinking about how to avoid that trap.
Exactly. Washington, smart guy,
Yeah.
saw the danger right away after the fall of New York City. He starts retreating north, and White Plains becomes this key spot where he can try to hold off the British, buy some time, keep the army together.
Survival. Right.
Exactly. Survival first. And you have to remember, Howe is relentless at this point. He had already taken Staten Island back in July.
Unopposed to
Right, no resistance. Then, boom, Long Island in August.
Long Island, not a good day for the Americans.
It was a tough loss. August 27th, a lot of casualties. But Washington,
Yeah.
he pulls off this amazing evacuation.
Gets the army out of there.
Yeah, right under the noses of the British. 9,000 troops across the East River to Manhattan.
At night. Right.
2 nights, actually, August 29th and 30th. A logistical nightmare, but they pulled it off.
That's incredible. Talk about a close call.
It was. And it shows, that even though they were losing battles, the Americans were not giving up.
So they get to Manhattan thinking they can catch their breath, maybe.
Not a chance.
Ow.
How he lands on Manhattan on September 15th.
Uh,
But the next day at Harlem Heights,
yeah.
the Americans stop them, hold their ground.
Wow, so they're still a fighting force.
Exactly. It was a shock to the British. Then Howe tries to land at Throg's Neck, but fails.
So he's getting a little frustrated.
I'd say so. So he changes tactics, lands at Pell's Point on October 18th. And this is where it gets interesting.
Lay on me.
He's starting to encircle Washington's army, classic pincer movement. The British forces coming from the north and east, troops already in Manhattan to the south, and then the Royal Navy.
Ah, controlling the Hudson.
Yep, blocking any escape to the west. A real dangerous situation for Washington.
So Howe's got his headquarters at New Rochelle, right?
Right. And his forward troops, they're moving fast. They reach Merrimack, and that's only 7 miles from the American supply depot in White Plains.
So close. That must have sent chills down Washington's spine.
Yeah, losing those supplies would have been devastating. So Washington sends Colonel Rufus Putnam on a reconnaissance mission.
To get some intel.
Yeah, figure out what the British are up to.
Good scout.
The best. Putnam comes back with a report, and it's not good. He's seen the British advance, and he knows they're a direct threat to both the army and the supplies.
So this intel, it's a game changer. What does Washington do?
He acts quickly.
Yeah.
Same day, he sends Putnam back with orders for Lord Stirling. His troops are furthest north. They have to get to White Plains immediately.
No time to waste.
None. Stirling's men arrive the next morning, October 21st. More American units follow throughout the day. And Washington, seeing how bad the situation is, decides to move most of the army to White Plains.
It's a race against time now.
Absolutely. He has to get there before Howe cuts him off. It's all about survival at this point.
Okay, so everyone's converging on White Plains. What happens in those days leading up to the actual battle?
Well, Howe is still advancing, but he's moving slowly. And there's this group of loyalists, American colonists, fighting for the British in Mamaroneck.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and Lord Stirling, he decides to launch a night attack on them. Colonel Hazlitt leads the charge.
Hazlitt, he was a tough soldier, wasn't he?
One of the best. They capture over 30 prisoners and take some much-needed supplies. But they suffer casualties, too.
A small victory, but every little bit helps.
Right. And this skirmish, it might have influenced Howe's thinking. He decides to move part of his right wing to Mamaroneck, probably to protect his flank and keep his supply lines open.
Makes sense.
Then, on October 22nd, the British get a huge boost. 8,000 more troops arrive under General von Knyphausen.
8,000. That's a lot of fresh soldiers.
Yeah, it gives Howe a big advantage. Meanwhile, Washington is getting ready. On October 23rd, he sets up his headquarters at the Elijah Miller House in North White Plains.
Okay, so he's picked his spot.
It's a good one. He chooses high ground and orders the construction of trenches, 2 lines of them.
Standard procedure back then?
Yeah, essential for defense.
Yeah.
Their right flank is protected by the Bronx River, lots of swampy ground there. And behind them, steeper hills, perfect for a fallback position if they need it. The American line stretches for about 3 miles.
Sounds pretty formidable.
Yeah, Washington was using the terrain to his advantage. But there's this one hill, Chatterton's Hill, that becomes really important.
I've heard of that. It was key, right?
Absolutely. It overlooks the plain that the British would have to cross to attack the main American lines. At first, it's only defended by a few hundred militias.
Mostly local guys.
Yeah, including some from Massachusetts.
Mm.
But its location, its defensible position, made it vital.
So while all this is going on, Howe is still trying to outmaneuver Washington.
Exactly. On October 24th and 25th, he moves his army from New Rochelle to Scarsdale. It looks like he was trying to intercept General Charles Lee.
Lee, he was on his way to join Washington, wasn't he?
Yes, with reinforcements. Lee has to change his route and march through the night to avoid them. Howe stays in Scarsdale until the morning of October 28th.
The day of the battle.
Right. And that's when he starts marching towards White Plains. His right wing is under General Clinton, and the Hessians on the left are led by General von Heister.
Okay, we've got the armies, the movements, the setup. Let's get into the thick of it. Who's involved in the actual fighting at White Plains? Tell me about the troops.
All right, so on the British side, you have regular British Army units and their Hessian allies.
Okay.
The British have their 16th and 17th regiments of light dragoons.
Cavalry.
Right, those are your mounted troops. They're important for scouting, chasing down fleeing enemies, things like that. Then you've got the Elite Guards Brigade, the 1st and 2nd Battalions. They're always at the front of the tough fights. Several regiments of foot, too. Yeah, your standard line infantry. The 5th, 23rd, 27th, 28th, 35th.
Keep going, keep going.
The 42nd Royal Highland Regiment, that's the famous Black Watch.
Tough fighters.
Oh, yeah. And the 49th, for artillery, they had companies from the 4th Battalion, Royal Artillery. Well-equipped, experienced. This is a serious army.
They came to play. What about the Hessians? Who do they have?
So for the Hessians, you have the Grenadier Regiment von Rahl. Grenadiers, those are your big guys, usually the tallest and strongest soldiers.
Leading the charge.
Often, yeah. And then the Fusilier Regiment von Knyphausen. These are professional soldiers hired by the British.
Mercenaries.
Yeah, basically. But very effective. The British paid top dollar for these guys.
And they expected results.
Absolutely.
So that's the British and the Hessians. What about the Americans? Who's facing them at White Plains?
So the Americans in the thick of it were mostly from Spencer's division. That include Parsons' Brigade and Wadsworth's Brigade.
Okay.
And within those brigades, you had a mix of Continental Army regulars and militia.
So some seasoned troops and some less experienced.
Right. You had guys from Connecticut, New York, Delaware, Maryland, and Massachusetts. A real mix.
That was the nature of the Continental Army, wasn't it? A real melting pot.
Absolutely.
Okay, so both sides are ready. Let's break down the battle itself. October 28th. What are the key moments, the turning points?
Well, as Washington is out there scouting the terrain, trying to decide where to place his troops.
He likes to see things for himself.
Always. He gets word.
Okay.
The British are on the move.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. He rushes back to headquarters and starts issuing orders. The 2nd Connecticut Regiment, under General Spencer, they're sent out to slow down the British.
Delaying action.
Right. Buy some time. And, critically, he sends reinforcements to Chatterton's Hill.
He knows how important that hill is.
He does. The 1st Delaware Regiment, led by Colonel Hazlitt, a very good unit.
Hazlitt again. He's everywhere.
He was a real workhorse. And then McDougal's brigade. That included the 3rd New York, the 19th Continental, and the 1st Maryland.
Solid units.
Oh, yeah. Plus the 1st and 2nd New York regiments.
Yeah.
So he's put a lot of manpower on that hill.
So what happens with that initial delaying action? Those Connecticut boys, what do they run into?
So they meet the Hessians,
Yeah.
led by Colonel Rahl, at Hart's Corners.
Rahl, he was known for being aggressive, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, he was a tough one. There's a firefight, and the Americans actually hold their own for a while. They even use stone walls for cover.
Smart.
But then the British column, under General Clinton, starts to threaten their flank.
Uh-oh, gotta pull back.
They have to. They retreat across the Bronx River, but then the British dragoons show up.
Cavalry. Bad news for retreating infantry.
Exactly. The retreat gets a little disorganized. Those dragoons were fast.
So what about the Hessians? Rawl, does he push on towards Chatterton's Hill?
He does, but when they try to take the hill,
Yeah.
the militia, they put up a fight. They actually push the Hessians back at first.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it surprised the British. They actually halt their entire advance for a bit.
To regroup.
Yeah, Howe and his officers, they need to figure out what to do. They didn't expect that much resistance. It gives Washington some breathing room.
So those militia boys, they did their job. Bought some time.
They did.
Yeah.
But then the Hessians, they start bombarding the hill with artillery.
Raining down fire.
Yep. And it scares the militia. A lot of them, they panic and run.
Understandable. They're not professional soldiers.
Right. But McDougal, he rallies them, gets them back in line. They set up a new defensive line, militia on the right, and the more experienced Continentals along the crest of the hill.
Holding the high ground. Important.
Crucial.
But the British, they're not going to just let that stand. They want that hill.
Right. Howe, he orders a full-on assault.
All right, we go.
He sends a detachment of British and Hessians to take the hill. The Hessians are leading the charge. Colonel Rowell attacks the American right, and Colonel von Donop hits the center. At the same time, General Leslie, he's leading a British column against the American left.
So they're hitting them from all sides.
Trying to. But von Donop, he has trouble crossing the Bronx River.
Bogged down.
Yeah, maybe some hesitation there, too. The British actually get across first. Meanwhile, on the right, Rowell, he's charging bayonets fixed. He scatters the militia, but it exposes the flank of McDougal's Continentals. The Maryland and New York regiments.
Oh, no, that's not good.
No, it's not. But those guys, they hold their ground. They fire volley after volley into the British.
Brave men.
Incredibly brave. They stop the British advance, at least for a little while.
Buying some time.
Yep. But that exposed flank, it means they can't stay there. They have to retreat. And when they fall back, the rest of the American line, they have to retreat too.
So the British take the hill.
They do. But it was a hard fight. Both sides took heavy casualties.
Yeah, let's talk about those casualties. What are the numbers?
It's tough to say for sure. The records aren't perfect.
Happens a lot with these old battles.
It does. One British report says 214 British and 99 Hessian casualties.
What?
But historians now think that Hessian number might be too high. It might include losses from other engagements around the same time.
Okay, so maybe not quite that many.
Right. A better guess for Hessian losses at White Plains is probably closer to 53.
Still a lot.
Definitely. Another British report, it gives different numbers. 48 killed, 182 wounded, and 4 missing.
So even on the British side, the numbers are all over the place.
They are. And for the Americans, it's even harder to say. Estimates range from 150 to 500 killed, wounded, and captured.
A big range.
Yeah. One estimate, it focuses just on the Continentals under McDougal and Spencer. And they say maybe 50 killed, 150 wounded, and 17 missing.
So we're talking about hundreds of casualties on both sides.
At least. We don't have good numbers for Hazlitt's Delaware Regiment or the Massachusetts Militia.
They were definitely in the thick of it, though.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the fighting dies down. What happens next? Do the armies just stare at each other for a while?
Kind of. They stay put for 2 days. Howe, he reinforces Chatterton's Hill, digs in, makes sure he holds it. And Washington, he's reorganizing his troops, getting ready for whatever comes next.
Always thinking ahead.
Always. On October 30th, Howe gets even more reinforcements. More Hessians and some troops from Waldeck. He wants to attack again the next day, but
What?
it starts raining. Hard. All day on October 31st.
The weather. Always a factor.
It really is. It delays the British attack. And by the next morning, when Howe is finally ready to go, he finds that Washington is gone.
Slipped away again.
He did. During the night, Washington withdrew his army north to the hills near North Castle. Another smart retreat. He avoids another big battle he might not win.
Howe must have been furious.
I'm sure he was. But instead of chasing after Washington, Howe decides to go south, back towards Manhattan.
Interesting. Why?
He wants to finish clearing the Americans out of Manhattan Island.
Control of New York is still the main prize.
Exactly. It all leads up to the Battle of Fort Washington on November 16th. The British take the fort, but again, Washington avoids total defeat.
Escapes again. So White Plains wasn't the decisive victory Howe was hoping for?
No, not at all.
What happens to Washington after he retreats north?
He eventually crosses the Hudson at Peekskill with most of the army. He leaves some New England regiments behind to protect supply depots and those important river crossings.
And hold those key points.
Definitely. But the British, they keep the pressure on. They push Washington and his remaining forces across New Jersey all the way into Pennsylvania.
Tough times for the Americans.
Really tough.
Yeah.
Morale is low. They're losing men and supplies. But this retreat,
Yeah.
it actually sets the stage for one of the most famous moments in the whole war.
You're talking about Trenton.
I am. Facing a desperate situation, Washington needs a win. So he does something really bold. He crosses the Delaware River on Christmas night,
In the dead of winter.
freezing cold, snowing, and then he launches a surprise attack on the Hessians at Trenton on December 26th.
And he wins. A huge victory for the Americans.
It was a real turning point. It boosted morale, it showed that the Americans could still win, and it showed just how brilliant a commander Washington really was.
Okay, so looking back, big picture now. What's the legacy of White Plains? How should we remember this battle?
It was a British tactical victory, no doubt. They took Chatterton Hill, but it wasn't the crushing blow they wanted.
They didn't destroy the Continental Army.
Exactly. And that's because of Washington's leadership. He avoids total defeat, keeps his army together.
He lived to fight another day.
And those retreats, they were just as important as any victory.
So White Plains, it's a story of strategic maneuvering, resilience.
Absolutely. It really shows the challenges both sides faced. How trying to trap Washington constantly adapting, always looking for an advantage.
He was a master of that.
He was. And, White Plains had a real impact on the rest of the war. It led to the British taking Fort Washington, but it also set up Washington's victory at Trenton. It's all connected.
The cause and effect. Every battle has consequences.
Exactly.
So White Plains, it might not be as famous as some other battles, but it deserves its place in history.
Absolutely.
And it's still remembered today, isn't it?
It is. The White Plains Historical Society, they commemorate the battle every year at the Jacob Purdy House.
Yeah.
That was Washington's headquarters during the battle.
That's cool.
And there have been 2 U.S. Navy ships named after the battle, the USS White Plains, an escort carrier from World War II, and another USS White Plains, that was a supply ship.
Keeping the memory alive.
And then there's that legend, the Headless Horseman and the Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, yeah, that's a spooky one.
Some people think he was inspired by a Hessian soldier who was decapitated by a cannonball during the battle.
Wow. So White Plains, it's got a little bit of everything. Strategy, bravery, and even some ghost stories.
It does. It's a fascinating battle.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into White Plains, what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I'd say think about the incredible pressure that both Washington and Howe were under. It was a critical moment in the war, and every decision they made had huge consequences. And just imagine if things had gone differently. What if Washington hadn't gotten that crucial intelligence from Colonel Putnam about Howe's flanking maneuver?
Right, what if?
How would the war have played out? Would America have won its independence? It really makes you think about how close things were, how even a seemingly small battle like White Plains could have changed the course of history.
Food for thought. Great stuff today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Battle of White Plains.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about this period of history.
Until next time, keep diving.
Keep exploring.